guys, today we're talking about sarcasm. I know, what are we talking about sarcasm for? You might be wondering. We love it. Sarcasm is funny, right?
What do you think? Sophia, that looks beautiful.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
But don't you have to be a virgin to wear a white wedding dress?
Please, the last time I was a virgin, the Louisiana Purchase was still in escrow.
The answer is in the definition. So let's just talk about it. Let's just dive right in. Google says that the definition of sarcasm is the use of irony to mock or to convey contempt. Merriam-Webster defines sarcasm as a sharp utterance designed to cut or give pain. So the keywords are mock, contempt, cut, pain. Sarcasm seems simple enough, seems innocent enough. Synonyms, though, for sarcasm also include words like barb, as in barbed wire, cut, diss, dig, insult, offense, put down, slur, and satire and irony. But let's think about it for a minute. But sarcasm is very, very different from satire. So satire is using humor or exaggeration directed towards like a large general group or audience to kind of call attention to or call people out on their foolishness, their follies, their weaknesses, or their vices. Satire tends to have a hint of constructive criticism behind it. Satire synonyms are words like wit, parody, quip. There's no real negative association with satire. A really well-known example of satire would be George Orwell's book, Animal Farm. In this book, George Orwell writes, all animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others. That's calling out the folly or the weakness of society to say that everyone's created equal, but there are still classes and different scales of treatment for the general public. So it's calling out a vice to a general group of people in a comic way. That's satire. Very different from sarcasm. Remember those key words in the definition of sarcasm of mock, contempt, cut, pain. There's a bit of a difference there between sarcasm and satire. Now let's look at irony. Sarcasm is also very different from irony. Irony, in stark contrast, is when what is communicated means the exact opposite of what is actually said. There's a gap between reality and expectation. Irony synonyms can also overlap with satire with humor, parody, and quip, but where they don't overlap is with sarcasm synonyms. Sarcasm is very specifically different, but we use the words sarcasm, satire, and irony interchangeably, and they're not at all even close to being the same thing. An example of irony would be someone sitting on a couch with a huge dog on their lap and saying, "I'm so glad that I have a lap dog." It's not really a lap dog. A lap dog generally is really small and fits on the lap. That's why it's called a lap dog. So what was said means the exact opposite of what actually really is. But again, notice the absence of a cutting innuendo. Sarcasm is notably insincere. Sarcasm is attacking in nature with the intent to injure. Now, just for the sake of argument, I went to the Urban Dictionary. The Urban Dictionary tends to have an element of truth to it, but it tends to be edgy and absent of politically correct definitions and usage of words, but there's an element of truth behind the definitions that they list there. And this is what I found interesting, because when I looked up sarcasm in the Urban Dictionary, it said the ability to insult idiots without them realizing it. So if that doesn't speak volumes, and if that isn't enough, let's dig into a little bit more scientific geeky stuff. Let's back up a little bit and think for a moment about that question, why then? Why are we doing this video? Why are we talking about it? Let's put the use of sarcasm under a great big spotlight, shall we? I read an article in Psychology Today that refers to sarcasm as a thinly veiled attempt to disguise one's feelings of fear, hurt, and anger. Further, the same article suggests that sarcasm is actually used for one of three reasons: social awkwardness, repressed anger, and insecurity. Whoa. Eye-opening or what? Think about it. There is a substantial amount of evidence in the professional community, the sociological community, the psychological community, the neurological community, the mental wellness communities, that suggest that sarcasm as a form of communication is extremely damaging to relationships, not just romantic relationships. We're talking about relationships between educators and children, between employers and employees, between leaders of all kinds and subordinates. Specifically because sarcasm requires the listener to be able to detect deliberate falseness from the speaker, at the same time comprehend the intent to criticize. The listener must be able to recognize and interpret the attitude of the speaker, aka read their mind. The listener must have shared knowledge with the speaker. For those reasons, the ability to pick up on social cues and the ability to infer others' thoughts and feelings is vital to being able to recognize and process sarcasm when we hear it. As a result, for some people, the use of sarcasm can be very confusing and even damaging. For instance, young children or individuals that have a delayed social development, think autism, simply don't have the social cognition in order to understand and process sarcasm. So the use of sarcasm around these individuals, and I'm sure many, many, many others, is really damaging and harmful. So what about everyone else? Does this mean that everyone else is immune as long as they have the social cognition to understand sarcasm when it's used? What do you think? I will say for me, while I was doing research for this video, I found a ton of references correlating intelligence with the use of sarcasm. And this could be why sarcasm is looked at as a positive thing. It could be why we think it's harmless and fun and entertaining, even in some cases, beneficial. Oscar Wilde, who died 123 years ago, so times have changed a little bit since Oscar Wilde walked the earth, and he's the one that coined the phrase, sarcasm is the lowest form of wit and the highest form of intelligence. And we've taken that quote and we've run with it. My contention with the overuse of that quote is simply by looking at what the definition of wit and the definition of intelligence is, and then re-quoting Mr. Wilde with the definition of wit and intelligence inserted. Case in point. Wit is defined as mental sharpness, while intelligence is defined as the ability to acquire knowledge. What kind of knowledge is not specified in the definition of intelligence. It's just the ability to acquire knowledge. So if we go back and we insert the definition of wit and intelligence into Oscar Wilde's quote, this is what it sounds like. Sarcasm is the lowest form of mental sharpness, but the highest form of one's ability to acquire knowledge. Sarcasm is the lowest form of mental sharpness, but the highest form of one's ability to acquire knowledge. In other words, The use of sarcasm doesn't necessarily mean that the speaker is smarter in the traditional sense of the word. It simply means that the speaker has a higher level of social cognition. And what's even more compelling, in my opinion, is it sounds to me like Oscar Wilde is actually saying that the use of sarcasm is a tool for the mentally unsharp. The mentally unwell. An article I read by the American Psychological Association delved a bit more into the scientific and biological aspects of the use of sarcasm, referring to lesions on certain lobes of the brain and how it's affected. And they concluded in this article that I read that no correlation, and I quote, no correlation was found between performance and executive functioning. The performance of the sarcasm task, that's what they mean by performance, was independent or irrespective of overall intellectual ability or formal education. So their findings concluded that intelligence had nothing at all to do with the use of sarcasm. In this article, they went on to say that sarcasm could actually be understood as a form of communication where passive aggressiveness is the primary motivator behind what is spoken. It actually could be considered a socially acceptable form of verbal violence under the disguise of humor. I have noticed a trend in my own personal life and my own personal observations where I've noticed a high number of people who are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually unwell are also the same group of individuals that tend to use sarcasm excessively, even in their day-to-day conversations in business and with their family. Not on the special occasion where someone cuts them off in traffic and doesn't use their blinker when they're merging. We resort to sarcasm as a form of escapism or as a blended form of fight, flight, fawn response in any given situation where we cannot process our own emotions or our own response to a situation or an environment where we're uncomfortable, where we're feeling emotional pain, fear, or anxiety or anger, and we're just not sure how to respond. And we need to be able to recognize this. I think it's very important. I think it's vital to pay attention. This is how we get in touch with our emotions. This is how we get healthy, by paying attention. Sarcasm, unfortunately, has become a dependable and reliable way for us to respond to those uncomfortable situations. Sarcasm can become a habit because it's such a comfortable blanket or veil to hide behind. We can always respond, "Oh, just kidding," if our sarcasm isn't received well by someone. I honestly think it's time to stop and rethink our use of sarcasm. And I really think that while we're walking this journey to healing and wellness, that we need to start paying a lot more attention to our own use of sarcasm as well as the people in our lives and how they're using sarcasm with us, because I think it can be a big red flag. Sarcasm, in my opinion, alludes to an underlying current of disdain towards the subject, and the likelihood of unhealed mental, physical, emotional, spiritual injuries or traumas from the past, and or the possibility of mental illness in the speaker. I feel like these are worthy thoughts to ponder. If you watch this video and you blow it off, that's on you. But I'll tell you what, I feel like it's worth the time to start paying attention and start considering, or at least reconsidering, our own use of sarcasm and start paying attention to others in our lives in every kind of relationship, not just romantic ones, and others' use of sarcasm with us. I hope you guys take care of yourselves. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.